All right, welcome back to the Gaza War Sit Rep. It's day 104. I've got John Elmer here. We are doing military analysis that does not disdain Arab military capacities and understands guerrilla warfare. So if that's what you want, stay tuned. We're going to go over the headlines, of course, and then we're going to talk about October 7th and Hannibal everywhere. Hannibal, 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 everywhere you look. That's what this is about. But first, let's go through some of the things that happened today. I've mentioned this Twitter account before, Aryjeay, Aryjeay, and he did a daily summary of all of the resistance operations today. He does all the fronts. Yemen carried out an operation against an American ship called the Chem Ranger. The Chem Ranger. In the Gulf of Aden with several anti-ship missiles. The big list from Qassam brigades, that's Hamas's armed wing, thermobaric grenade, 5 casualties in Khan Yunis, detonated a pre-rigged building with explosive devices, targeting the Zionist infantry unit consisting of 30 soldiers. Is that the biggest one so far, John?
I mean, they haven't been using numbers as liberally as they have been in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
I don't remember them saying, I mean, remember there was that one attack where they came up with the periscope and they rigged up that camp with explosives all around the outside.
Yeah.
I think they had a number, something like 30 in that as well.
Yeah. That's
but also
really...
just consisting of is a bit of that. They're caging that a bit, I think, is
hedging a little bit.
Hedging it a little.
Yeah. 4 partially destroyed 4 Merkava tanks, 2 APCs, 5 military D9 bulldozers in various battle zones in the strip. Various is the bane of my existence when I try to make maps of this stuff. It's the place where most attacks take place is a place called Various. Blew up an APC with a Yasin 105, clashed with a Zionist infantry unit of 12 soldiers and eliminated 4 east of Jabalia. So Jabalia.
Yeah, still fighting in Jabalia.
Still fighting in Jabalia.
Yeah.
Shelled gathering in Jabalia. Targeted
released a video today from Jabalia too.
Yeah. Special forces in Jabalia. Sheikh Ajlin area, southwest of Gaza City. Gaza City, Tufa neighborhood in Gaza City. Others in Khan Yunis and Gaza City. Then there's the Hezbollah. Then there's the list of Hezbollah. Targeted the Barkat Risha site with appropriate weapons, Admit Barracks, Al Malikiya site, Samaka site of Kafr Shuba, and the occupied Shaba farms. Islamic resistance in Iraq attacked a US base using drones in Qamishli in Syria. This is Syria, Kurdistan. So the Iranians attacked Erbil in Kurdistan, and the Iraqis have attacked a base in Syrian Kurdistan. So, wider war is here, for sure.
Yeah, and then the American attacks on the Houthis as well, on the Ansar Allah formations. I think there was the 5th one today that they've struck them.
Yes, exactly. So there's a couple of things to note about that. One is, I think, again, Arya showed a picture of the ship that was hit, the Chem Ranger. Here, lots of damage to the ship there. And then, so the Americans bombed Hodeidah, Port, Sada, and Damar. And the Houthis basically said, "We're glad that you did this." So Ansar Allah said, the direct involvement of the US and Britain does not frighten us. It reassures us. It is a blessing and an honor to be in direct confrontation with them, whereas they've fought against us using their tools without facing direct consequences. So yeah, deterrence doesn't seem to be...
No, wrong group for that.
Not the right group. Should we show Biden? I don't know, violating any copyright by showing Biden. Someone asks Biden today, are the air raids working? And he says, by working, do you mean stopping the Houthis? No. Are they going to continue? Yes. So someone said that's pretty much the best summary of U.S. foreign policy
U.S.
that
foreign policy
you could possibly do. Hezbollah, did you see this one, John? This is a good one. 75% of Israelis displaced from the north started new life elsewhere, away from Hezbollah nightmare. I don't know if can't verify it, but they're reporting that it's being reported in Israeli media that people have just.
Yeah, I mean, Israeli media puts numbers up around 500,000. Like their official numbers are 150,000, but it's pretty well known in Israel that it's 500,000.
Wow. Okay, now there's one thing I want to talk to you about. Okay, well, let's just talk a bit. Let's just two more things. One is the
Well, one
Iraqi.
thing was that Hezbollah released a video today
Oh,
of their Rad-1 units down on the border, loading up double anti-tank missiles and basically having an infantry presence along the border with the north, which is the reason why those hundreds of thousands of people aren't going to go back home.
yeah, and
And so Hezbollah showed a video of them today.
which is why the Israeli divisions that are committed there also can't just leave, because they have to stay there and take those hits, because if they leave, then they fear that those Hezbollah troops will move in. What a predicament. So the Americans also apparently tried to do some kind of drone attack in Iraq, and that drone was apparently shot down. This is what Arya thinks anyway. An MQ-9 drone that was crashing near Baghdad as a fireball. So
I didn't see that one.
Yeah, it's a good one, right?
Those are the big drones.
The big drones. So they fire missiles of their own. They're not suicide drones. Yeah.
No, they're the biggest drone in the world.
Is that a Reaper?
That's a Reaper.
Yeah.
It's beyond a Predator.
It's beyond a Predator. It's the Grim Reaper. So, okay. Now there's the Pakistan Iran situation, which is just, I mean, so Pakistan hit some sites in Iran. And it's weird because Iran attacked some sites in Pakistani Balochistan, and then Pakistan's revenge was to hit sites in Iranian Balochistan. So it's like whether they're attacking or avenging attacks, it's always Balochistan that gets hit on both sides of the border. And I don't know. I don't have a good sense of what's going on here. I mean, if we believe Iran, they were preempting some kind of attack, another additional attack that was going to come from Balochistan, and Pakistan and Iran are going to patch it up. I mean, you and me have both been following the Afghanistan war for the 20 some years, and if based on that, we know that Pakistan is like crawling with intelligence agencies and covert operations within covert operations. So making sense of this kind of thing when it blows up the way that it has blown up here is really hard. I don't know if you have any insights.
No, I don't. I probably would have asked you.
So to me, it's like maybe Pakistan was trying to do something, or maybe some part of like Pakistan's intelligence services, the ISI, the Inter-Services Intelligence, is like different factions. Some of them are closer to Americans and some of them are more independent. They're also having a huge Imran Khan problem now, where the political establishment is against the big movement that brought Imran Khan to power, and they overthrew him. And so it's all there's so many, all of which is to say there's lots of opportunities for lots of dirty tricks, divisions, and dirty war things to happen, and Iran would always be a target of that. I just, it's not the kind of thing I would have expected Iran to do at this juncture, like to get involved in something with Pakistan. So, but one of the central tenets of my worldview is that there are no stupid people. So there must be things that I don't know about this. There must be something that I'm missing that we may find out in time.
I missed the sit rep the other day, but you talked about uh, Iran joining in the missile war.
Yeah, yeah, I sure did. I sure
Yeah.
did. So this
Escalations all around.
escalations all around, and yeah, and Iran also took credit for a couple of missile attacks that were unattributed. Right, there were these missile attacks off of the Indian Ocean a couple of weeks ago, and Iran today said, "Yeah, that was us." Um, 3 operations targeting 2 Israeli ships in the Indian Ocean earlier this month. So they didn't take credit for them at the time, but now they have. So here's what I wanted to talk to you about before we get to October 7th. It's this thing the Israelis are saying about how Hamas has reconstituted itself and how Israeli forces have lost control over the north and a large area is back under Hamas control. And then the phrasing that I saw here, Hamas has succeeded in rehabilitating its military brigades in northern Gaza in addition to appointing new leaders. And my problem with this is I don't think they had to rehabilitate or appoint new leaders. And I don't think
No.
Israel would be in a position to know.
It doesn't appear that they're in a position to know that. If they knew that, they would be in a lot better fighting position in
Yeah,
this war.
yeah,
But the narrative in the Israeli media this week was that like the day after that like term, like what are we going to do the day after?
mm-hmm.
Israeli media this week is saying like it is that time in the
Mm.
north. Like the war is over in the north, according to Israeli planners, they're saying it's over. They're saying that the thing that they were trying to achieve in the north has been achieved. And in the Israeli media, the discussion is like, what are we doing now? Because the day after has come faster than people expected it to. So, yeah,
Mm.
this reconstituting thing was always, I mean, that was always going to be the case. They have a traditional order of battle where they're able to reconstitute themselves, and that's one of their fighting attributes, right? Like, that's one
Yeah.
of their assets.
But they haven't had to do it yet.
There's no
I
sign that they
I don't
have.
think.
No,
Yeah,
they've definitely lost a
thousands.
few
Yeah,
battalion commanders,
yeah,
and they've lost 2 brigade commanders that were both senior fighting members, but not as senior as the Israelis that are in
right.
captivity right now in Gaza, that we
Yeah,
know now from October 7th that those guys are there. So yeah, nothing like the top echelon leadership.
right.
And they haven't even had a whereabouts of any of their captives this whole time. So you're not going to find Yahya Sinwar
No.
accidentally somehow separately from the fact that you have to find your 150 prisoners that they have no idea where they are. So it's not clear what's happening. I mean, we keep saying this for months now. It's not clear what the plan here is, but
What?
to withdraw their troops from
Yeah.
the north at
But
this
they haven't
stage,
with that's also not even true, right? They did some kind of partial withdrawal there. There's 3 divisions still there. There's 1 division
yeah, there's
withdrawn.
still so many troops there.
Yeah.
There's no
Three
question.
divisions is tens of thousands of troops
Yeah,
still.
yeah. And they're
And
all in the buffer zone too,
right,
as well.
right.
I think what they largely mean is they're not doing clearing operations block to block
Right.
anymore. But that,
That was just sitting duck operations for them.
yeah, that
So
never
why would
seemed to
they?
be happening. There never seemed to be a systematic. The only systematic targeting is the school stuff. Like just
Yeah,
even, I don't know
hospitals.
when we last talked, just a few days ago. That every day since then, we've seen footage of them blowing up a school,
Yeah.
like rigging it up, wiring it up,
Well, the
moving away
university,
from it, and
the
then blowing up the
university,
universities.
which was just like vaporized. I don't know
Yeah,
if I've ever seen an explosion like that
yeah.
before.
It was a very angry explosion.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so you mentioned the captives, and I think that does take us to the thing we wanted to talk about today. Um, we've been we've all you and Electronic Intifada, we've all been out on a limb on when we're talking about October 7th since sometime afterwards when we hypothesized that a lot of the people killed were killed by the Israelis and and of course that was such a awful thing to say, and how dare you say such things. And so now we have Ynet, this investigation, which is like a chronology,
Yeah.
in
By
Hebrew.
Ronan Bergman, who is the Mossad official
Yeah,
stenographer. So every
historiography.
interesting story that's come out since October 7th about the catastrophic destruction of the Gaza division has been him. He was the one who wrote the New York Times story that talked about how they went into the intelligence hub, and that they knew every room in the intelligence hub, and that they had details on every single part of this operation. And then this story happens, and yeah, we have been careful, like even from the beginning, right? When we were hearing about 40 dead babies, like
Yeah,
I've been doing this work since the Friday night that it happened, right?
yeah,
I was on I'm
yeah,
on these groups already, these social media groups, and was getting this information right
yeah.
away, watching hundreds of hours of footage over the last months. And I remember just even talking to you and saying, like, I don't see any babies. I've seen a lot of bodies. I've seen the morgue
Yeah.
trucks. I've seen, like the evidence doesn't, I don't see any babies, let alone dozens
And
of
then
them.
we went through the Haaretz list of all the people that they listed. I looked at it more or less just before the ground invasion, so when they started adding new casualties at that point. And yeah, there was one child, I think, that was like a
There's one
toddler
child.
age. Yeah. So, but there's that approach to it, which is to say the lists the lists don't match the claims. But then there's also, what Max and Aaron and them have done on the Gray Zone, where they kind of also talk about the sources, like
Hmm.
Zaka and the individuals that are making these claims, and how they clearly made them up out of nothing. But then we have Ronan, and Ronan's story is fascinating for many reasons, because he he takes you, like they said, they minute by minute, and he he ends the story at noon on
Yeah.
October 7th,
Yeah.
12:30 on October,
Yeah.
like, yeah, 1 o'clock on October 7th, which is like the worst. The worst is definitely yet to come from the point of view of the Hannibal doctrine. But I mean, I don't know. Like, do you should we just go through it? Like, do you want
Yeah,
to take
let's
us
just
through
go
it?
through it because the timeline part is incredible because the
Yeah,
operation begins at 6:26 a.m.
yeah,
At 6:55 a.m. So Bergman's sources are Shabak and the IDF intelligence. So he's
right.
getting, and all the sources in this article are all named. They're all senior leadership. They're all the people that participated in this operation
Like, he
from the
takes you
Israeli side.
into the war room. You're
Yeah,
basically in the war room with these
yeah,
guys.
yeah.
And yeah, yeah, go on.
And you're in the helicopter because he has helicopter pilots. He has the person who was on the phone to the helicopter pilots. Okay, let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Yeah,
6:55 a.m.
yeah,
The military, the Gaza division military base at Riyam is overrun by 6:55 in the morning, including the commute from the Gaza Strip to the base. They took the base in minutes. They overran these 25 plus bases and outposts in minutes. It's unbelievable. The level of detail in this story of how like comprehensively they destroyed the IDF, because it's not just, so they collapse the Gaza division, which creates all kinds of chaos because the command and control structure is supposed to run through the Gaza division in this sector, right?
yeah.
So all the pilots, everyone that's reporting, like the IDF sent out a message early in the morning that said, anyone with a gun, go to the south. So people all went flooding, Israeli soldiers all went flooding down to the south with no orders, expecting to arrive and
But
get orders from the Gaza division.
we haven't talked about the Air Force yet. So 6:30, they do launch two F-16s. The F-16s are flying at 20,000 feet, so they can't target anything without assistance from the ground. So it turned out, Bergman says, that for about 45 critical minutes, armed fighter jets circled idly in the sky. The pilots landed at 8 o'clock and learned what happened a few kilometers from them.
Yeah. And by 8 o'clock, the IDF was putting planes on trucks and moving them from the airfield that's the closest to the base, because Qassam had taken all the way to Okafim. They had
Mind you,
taken
they
more
didn't, given how
territory.
little they knew, coming down and flying low in the possible, some lucky shoulder launched anti-aircraft missile could also have changed the
And
image
they
of the Air
had that.
Force
That's one
forever.
thing you see in the videos, is that you see in the morning that there's parts of each Qassam fighting unit looking at the sky. They're
Yeah.
expecting at any
Yeah.
moment for it to come. They have anti-aircraft missiles. They're ready for a battle. That the battle just never comes because the Gaza division collapses. So the IDF's command and control collapses. By 6:30 in the morning, there's no contact between the Gaza division and what they're calling the pit, which is like the war room in the basement of the defense ministry in Tel Aviv, which is like where everybody goes when something like this happens. Like the chief of staff Halevi shows up at 8:30. By 8:30, Qassam had the entire south held.
There were helicopters already from 650, Apache and Zik helicopters, but they don't have
They're
apparently
not
they're
communicating with
yeah.
anyone on the ground because the command and control of the Gaza division has collapsed.
Right.
So what they do is they join the WhatsApp and Telegram groups that literally I'm on sitting in Toronto. They're on the same groups, and they're being told where to target by people in a WhatsApp group, sometimes second and third hand being passed to them. And they're breaking all kinds of procedural rules here. They're talking on their cell phones, doing command stuff, which they're not supposed to do. But now they're talking on cell phones in the cockpit of the attack helicopter and getting messages saying, like, we're in the third house to the left of the water tower.
Right.
Like, that's the level of targeting.
At 7
Totally
o'clock,
insane.
Babur, the holiest of holies of Israeli security, I don't know what that means, remains at a loss and rushes to browse the Telegram pages of Hamas to understand what is happening in Israel. This will not be forgotten for a long time.
Yeah, they're watching the CCTV footage camera at the pit because they've lost contact with the Gaza division. So the main command and control of the IDF is watching the closed circuit security camera that's up on a telephone pole at Erez, the like most symbolic exit to the ghetto. And the guys are watching on the security camera saying, Qassam is in Erez. They hold Erez. They're sending messages to the helicopter pilots to bomb Riem military base,
Yeah,
the
so
home of the Gaza division,
the commanders ask for airstrikes on their own
on
bases.
their own bases. So the IDF goes around bombing their own bases. And this one guy says, that's in the command room, he said, all of the procedures were all thrown in the garbage. They got all of their procedures thrown in the garbage because they didn't have those command echelons didn't exist to make those calls. So it's a free for all. And it's not just, it's all procedures are thrown in the trash. And the Hannibal directive is for all units, tank, armor, police, helicopters, to shoot at that. It's an open fire zone.
Here's a description from 832. Two lone Apache helicopters in the air, operating on their own initiative, have managed to make radio contact with the commander of one of the companies on the ground. The company commander requests fire in his favor and is granted. After the shooting, the Apache pilots point their noses toward the west, and before their eyes a frightening sight is revealed, a huge human swarm of people flowing through the gaps toward the settlements of the south. In retrospect, it'll become clear that this is the second wave of raiders. The pilot decides to fire 2 missiles and dozens of shells from the helicopter gun at the gunmen indiscriminately in order to drive them back to Gaza. They identify a large breach and the crowd crossing through it. Success is limited because there are too few shells. Each helicopter only carries 6 missiles and 500 cannon shells. So they went back to rearm, returning to base around 10:20. So they fired 6 missiles and 500 cannon shells into
times 2.
Yeah, times 2 into whatever it is that they saw, which they're saying was 2, which Ronan is saying was 2 waves of terrorists. But this is not an area on which, this is not an admission that I trust Ronan on. I can say.
This commander says 9:45 a.m. carte blanche throughout the territory. There's no command and control, and because of that, their commanders are gone, taken into tunnels in Gaza, and so the soldiers that show up to fight on these bases show up, and the grenades are all locked away, and they can't get into the grenade cabinet of the ammo storage because their entire system has fallen apart and they can't find the multi-layered way to open this. So they don't have access to grenades. They're all wearing civilian clothes, and Bergman talks about them as, so it's his sources were obviously in Shabak, because Shabak comes out as the heroes in this story. They're the ones who fight for hours in their civilian clothes in the settlements, right? So he's telling you that these guys are all not in uniforms. He's talking about the soldiers all flooding down to the base in civilian cars and civilian buses, wearing civilian clothes to go down and fight. It's the scene that's described in this article that is like, what is it, 6,000 words? It's just chaos. It's chaos. There is no structure functioning. It's one thing to say that the Gaza division collapsed, but there's no backup. There's no secondary plan. It's not like another division moved in place with proper orders. They just fought in this chaos for 6 hours.
Because they're all armed. So they just
everyone's shooting at everyone. Yeah. And then this guy,
their weapons and their phones, and they throw down.
And then they get to these bases and they get all these new weapons, and the new weapons don't have the gun sights on them. The gun sights aren't calibrated. So these soldiers talk about showing up, being locked out of the ammo cupboards, grabbing these guns who don't have calibrated gun stocks. And he talks about shooting all over the Gaza envelope and missing all morning. That's his quote. It's just chaos, right? They're shooting at everything. And then you have the Nova Festival, which is basically right on the road between where Qassam is going to take over this base.
Can we talk about the Hannibal quote from this article?
Yeah.
12 o'clock noon. He says, 6 hours later, the fog was enormous. The command did not understand what Hamas's goals were. And he says the first videos of the abductees are arriving. The command understands that this is a completely different event. This is the moment. So we're talking about 12 noon on October 7th, when the IDF decides on a kind of return of the Hannibal order. He's softening it here, but he talks about after the kidnapping and murder in 1986, a new secret and controversial order was introduced. The order reads: immediate detection of the Hannibal incident, delay stopping of the abducting force at any cost, and release of the abductees. The original order said the main task becomes rescuing our soldiers, even at the cost of harming or injuring our soldiers. According to the publications, the order was changed and softened and also renamed in 2016, but obviously it wasn't. The 7 days investigation reveals that on midnight on October 7th, the IDF instructs all its fighting units in practice to use the Hannibal procedure. Although
midday, that's a misquote, not midnight, midday.
Midday, right. The instruction is to stop at all costs any attempt by Hamas terrorists to return to Gaza, using language very similar to the original Hannibal procedure, despite repeated assurances by the security establishment that the procedure has been canceled.
Yeah. All units, all sector.
All units, all sector, Hannibal procedure.
Yeah.
So they are from that
And
point
then
on.
the next part of the story talks about they hit 70 vehicles. They hit 70 vehicles with Apache fire and tank fire. That's the number that they are using. So if you can say, like, even if you just say there's two people in a car, we all know there's not two people in a car.
Especially when they're bloating into the car to flee at a music festival, for example,
Yeah.
where you're not going to.
They killed hundreds of people just in those 70 cars. That doesn't include the firefight that happens at the Nova Festival, which also has a mechanized IDF armored unit, a tank, on the premises. And we know from other reporting that they had border police at that site as well. And they also had security guards for the concert. And so there's many, many armed people at that point firing. I'm sure Kassam must have been like, what the heck is going on? Because they did not know that we know that the rave did not know that the rave was going to be where the rave was on Wednesday afternoon, and the rave started Friday. It's a Friday rave. So it's less than 36 hours.
Neither you nor I have probably been to a rave, but I gather that this is the nature of raves. It's like
it's not uncommon.
Yeah, it's a pop-up. But yeah, so there's an article by William Van Wagenen on the Cradle, how Israeli forces trapped and killed ravers at the Nova Festival. It's just from, I don't know, about a week ago. And he goes through a bunch of evidence, a bunch of articles. And one of the things that surprised me was that the Israeli police blockaded the vital 232 road exit. So 4,400 people were present at the Nova Festival. The majority managed to disperse or managed to escape, but Israeli police established roadblocks in both directions, trapping the partygoers. So there's quotes from people who were there. There was a lot of confusion. The police barricaded the road so we couldn't go near Be'eri. We couldn't go near Reim, the two nearby kibbutzim. This is Yaron Levin. He said when they had their first encounter with the terrorists fighting against the police that are there, two terrorists got lost in some kind of gunfight, so they found us. So they blockade the road. People get out of their car and flee east into open fields, or they in their cars. Many made it past the fields and hid. But body cam footage shows heavily armed Israeli police units taking up positions on the road and firing across the open field into the trees where civilians had taken cover.
Yeah, and there was also other security guards in those trees. So we have footage of the Israelis from the festival. You hear exiting gunfire from them. And so they're just like, what is going on? And there's also scenes where they run to the security guards, claiming, like, seeing the security and being like, you've come to save me. And they're shot by those security guards.
Nova attendee Gilad Karplus says to the BBC, we pretty much knew they would probably block the road. I'm pretty sure a lot of people got killed on those roads. We drove into the field and tried to hide from them. Afterwards, we got a bit deeper into the fields and they started firing sniper rifles on us from different places and also heavy artillery. Heavy artillery. And snipers.
They had sniper rifles. They didn't have heavy artillery.
He probably didn't know what it was. It was probably the helicopters.
Yeah. I mean, there's other talk of the helicopters that was quoted in the Haaretz article about they're using the term empty your belly, which basically meant to fire all 1,200 rounds of the 30 millimeter cannon that it has. firing like basically like pop bottle sized bullets out of a chain gun. So they're firing a
Yeah.
lot of ammunition and hitting, and that's what they're hitting. Like that, the cars that are in the field are the cars that were hit. The cars that tried to drive through the field are who the helicopter gunships hit
Yeah.
because that was a target because they didn't know who to hit. The other thing that we didn't say is that because the command and control had collapsed, the IDF believed that at each spot they were fighting, they all believed that that was the only spot that was happening. They didn't understand that there was 48 breaches in the wall and fighting at 80 different sites. They believed it was a single breach and that each commander had realized that he'd lost communication with the Gaza division, but each commander believed that that was because of the circumstance of their fight. They had no concept that it was happening all up and down the fence,
So
which is astonishing.
so it seems to me when you look at this event, this part of it, we've only gotten up to 1 o'clock, so there's a lot more to say. The tanks go into Kibbutz Berry the next day and
Yeah, once
start
sunset happens,
shelling houses.
they're shelling houses.
They're
Yeah,
shelling houses, um,
based
and
on WhatsApp groups.
based on based on targeting from WhatsApp groups who are hiding in like rocket shelters or whatever.
Yeah, or some of the one guy lives in his parents' basement. It was like a classic, just like some guy who's into like whatever, into ham radio and all this
Mm-hmm.
kind of stuff and has 10 screens in his house and connects them to the traffic cameras. He became this guy. Like there's a story in the Israeli press of how he was the hero, basically coordinating with these groups because people were coordinating on their WhatsApp groups, being like, we're stuck in this house in this kibbutz right now. Like tell people to come and help us. And those messages were basically going to this guy who lived like up the road and was just watching in the morning on his multiple screens. And so he's one of the heroes of this story too, which is just the most damning level of military collapse, just to have somebody in who's just a hobbyist, basically understanding and facilitating how you're going to target the killing of hundreds of people. And so just
Hundreds.
to even say, like, I don't know how long we want to talk about October 7th, but
Yeah.
just in the basic, simple math of this
Yeah.
situation, it's clear that the Israelis killed hundreds
Most.
of
Yeah.
people. This story stops at 1 p.m.
Bad.
The
I'm sure there's a reason for that. I'm
the
sure there's a
Qassam
bad
raid is
reason for that.
over by that time.
Right.
So are we talking when we have 500 and something civilian casualties at this point right now,
Yeah.
which we know includes all of these soldiers in civilian clothes, all of these
Mm-hmm.
Shabak, all of these police. So
Mm-hmm.
what does that take it down to? And then that there's a couple of hundred just modestly saying in 70 cars.
Yeah.
200 people is a modest number in those cars. And those cars were all completely destroyed. It wasn't like people got out of those cars and lived.
There's several aerial photos that I don't really even understand of what looks like cars parked in fairly neat rows and completely destroyed somehow.
Yeah, but
I'm
I
sure you've
think they
seen them.
strafed the whole rows of cars. I don't know if there's people in those cars.
Maybe they just
Um,
wanted to disable the cars so nobody could take them or something.
Blocking that when the story about the road being blocked by the police, like that
Yeah.
was just because those police for a short period of time were inside a cordon. Qassam had total control of the roads,
Mm,
and they had that control well into the afternoon because the
mm,
soldiers who report coming south, they report moving into ambushes. That Qassam held all of that ground. They held the police station. They held the important roundabouts. So there was nobody was going to be accessing. Um, and that was the thing. It's like in Israeli military terms, they set up a closed military zone. And if they weren't just murdering people for sport. If people turned around at the cordon, they weren't murdered. It's people running through the cordon. It's people panicking and driving out through fields and getting hit by attack helicopters. A lot of the carnage that we're seeing on that day is the result of the Gaza division collapsing, and then everybody in this Israeli military and civilian integrated structure firing their weapons haphazardly
chaotically at one another.
without any objective because they didn't know what the primary objective was. Everybody believed that their objective was the most important thing happening. They had no concept of the scale of what
Yeah.
was happening.
And they didn't know what Hamas was trying to do, so they didn't know what they were trying to thwart, even. Like, what are they trying to stop? So when they finally figure it out, they scream Hannibal, and then they start killing Israelis all over the place. Now, it seems to me that Hannibal directive has gone from October 7th to now to be almost like the organizing principle of Israeli society at this point. So we heard, I mean, I remember your reaction, John. I think it was on Electronic Intifada. It might have been on one of our broadcasts, but you were reacting to the proposal, the proposition of using poison gas in the tunnels. And you had this reaction where you were like, I can't believe they're even talking about using poison gas in tunnels where their own people might be. And now here we are with the mother of one of the Gaza captives saying
Yeah.
that her son was gassed, was poison gassed
Yeah.
by the Israeli army.
Our belief in the Israeli army was far too high. Our,
Yeah.
our esteem for them,
Yeah. And it was low, like just so people
and it was
understand when
super
John
low.
was like they gassed. Well, I don't even understand. Like I'm having trouble understanding what the tactical situation could have even been. Maybe they it was a tunnel and they just
We saw
gassed it.
footage. I don't know which we've seen footage in a tunnel that looked like gas. It was piled up corpses in a way that people like fell
Small.
on top of each other in a way, and we haven't seen that in any other place. But that footage exists, and Israel took credit for that. And when you look at that, it looks like the way people are draped over each other. It doesn't, that's not how fighters.
Are you supposed to have poison gas? According to whatever Geneva convent. I'm not a big, again, not a big believer in international law as existence or its any adherence to it, but you're not supposed to have poison gas handy, right?
I don't know if there's some loophole in it, but from what I understand from my reading is that after the US put CS gas down the tunnels in Vietnam, that they like made amendments to the like chemical weapons rules of war and banned that in confined spaces.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So
I don't know. But
poison
we spent,
gas.
remember on that very same show, or
Yeah.
we've talked about this flooding of the tunnels thing.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
they're just, where are those 7 pumps? What's
Yeah.
happening with that story, that they just create these stories that get international traction? They
Yeah.
force all of us to talk about these things, and they're
Yeah.
just strictly propaganda points.
Well, evidently the poison gas wasn't strictly propaganda. They gassed somebody. They gassed
Yeah,
and
they've gassed. It appears they gassed somebody. They hunted them down and shot them.
yeah.
They've bombed multiple of them. They shelled them all the way into Gaza. The people who are released and interviewed, the captives, all talk about how they were shot at on the way in. Their experience was being captured, being put in a car,
Mhm.
usually with their family, driving with Palestinians across the border,
Mhm.
getting shot at by Apaches on the way,
On the
and
way.
then getting inside Gaza. And the one woman says, like, she's all freaked out. And she says to the Qassam guys, she says, like, we're staying together. And
Yeah.
the fighter's like, what? And she's like, all of us, my family, we're staying together. And the fighter looks at her and is like, yes, of course you're
Yeah,
staying together.
obviously.
Like you're
Yeah.
obviously staying. And she was like, I thought we were going to be handcuffed to a wall in a basement. And instead
Right.
we moved in with a family and she never, her kids were never out of her sight the entire time
Mhm.
that they were in captivity. And you compare that with like what the Israelis are doing right outside the same buildings where their people are being held. The Israelis are stripping men naked
Torture.
in front of their children, if
Yeah.
not their children as well, uh, torturing them in a way that everyone in that society will remember for generations to come. The juxtaposition between the two just couldn't be starker.
But then what I keep coming back to is like these parents. I've mentioned it in the past three videos because I can't get over it. Like these parents coming out and saying, I'm willing to sacrifice my child. Parents of hostages saying, I'm willing to sacrifice my child so that we continue the war.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean,
Yeah. I mean, you also
I'm
have lots of
stumped.
them that are freaking out saying, bring my family member home. Like,
Yeah,
what is going on here? Like, we don't care if you release prisoners, just
right,
do it. Like, bring the people that are captured because of your military's catastrophic defeat. uh, it's the onus is then not on that army to try to rebuild trust with its community by massacring families, entire extended families, and blowing up schools and hospitals. That's not restoring faith
right,
in your state. And what is going to happen, which is basically what we've said since day one, there's going to be a day where they actually do leave the Gaza Strip, and Qassam is going to have a parade
right.
with tens of thousands of fighters, and then sometime a few months, some months later, thousands of Palestinians are going to get out of prison in a prisoner exchange that's going to look like a victory too. So all of what Israel is doing is basically just like vandalizing on a human scale, right? Like just
Yeah,
the I don't know if you saw that footage of Shujaiya today, but
I did.
it's not like they flattened the entire neighborhood and you could say, look at that flattened neighborhood. Now they can militarily operate within the area. It just looks like vandalism. It's just
Yeah,
smashed buildings. They're not all toppled to the ground. There's many 6 and 7 story buildings that would be very offensive positions for fighters to be in. So there's no military objective to the destruction. It's
yeah.
just like the guys who are taking the TikTok videos are in their tanks and just firing tank shells into Shujaiya, just firing them into the neighborhood. And that's what it looks like after. It doesn't look like you've cleared a path for your
No.
tanks.
Well, but path to where? I mean, like you have to have something that you're trying to do to know where you're going to clear the path to, right?
Yeah.
It's not counterinsurgency in that sense because you're not trying to take control of the population either. You, you're you're doing something you can't say, which is some kind of exterminist program, and you're getting the death by a thousand cuts in the process because whenever you stay in any place for a while, you get ambushed.
Yeah. And then Gallant, this is Defense Minister Gallant today. If Hamas is not completely dismantled, we will not be able to live in the Middle East.
Yeah,
I said
he said
something
that
like that
again.
on your show last time, but
Yeah,
he's just repeating it.
he's saying it over and over. And then Netanyahu's saying from the river to the sea, it has to all be ours, which is just the Likud charter. Mm.
That's the Likud charter. Yeah, and
But like
Regev was on BBC today. He said that Qassam, well, he doesn't. He says Hamas, but so Qassam ceased to exist as a military organization. Their battalions have been obliterated.
but that's not true.
It's just clearly not true, and it's demonstrably not true because the day that they leave, I mean, just look at today.
Yeah,
They said that
yeah.
the war's over, and we got a whole day of
Yeah,
reports.
and not just Khan Yunis, but of course Khan Yunis, which is in central Gaza for people who remember, but in Jabalia and in
Yeah,
Gaza City. So
yeah, in the north. Uh, let me just do this quickly. Al
Yeah.
Tufa, Al Tufa,
Hmm.
Gaza City, Sheikh Redwan, Gaza City, Jabalia,
Yeah.
Jabalia, east of Jabalia. These are all separate operations. Tufa and Daraj multiple times. Additionally, again, more east of Jabalia. It's it's a dozen attacks in the north,
Yeah.
and then it's got to be at least a dozen in Gaza City. And those are
The
their best fighters
You guys
too.
remember December? You remember our December map just to show you the locations, right?
Yeah,
Tufa,
yeah,
Jabalia, Beit Lahia. There's been lots of fighting in Beit Lahia.
yeah,
That big ambush you talked about at the last live stream in Sheikh Radwan,
yeah.
where they were watching it all on closed circuit. That was like a Hollywood movie. I mean,
It was
that you're
incredible.
seeing different screens, different views of the
Yeah. So just
whole
to
thing.
recap for anyone who didn't see it, this is a tunnel ambush that Qassam planned in Sheikh Redwan, which involved fighters above ground, fighters below ground, and then a commander at a third location watching on CCTV footage, watching the Israeli unit come into the building. They communicate on a closed telephone line. The commander is sitting watching a computer screen with the Israelis on the computer screen. We see them talking above ground and below ground and at that third location to set the ambush perfectly. Then we see the Israelis go into the tunnel and drop their camera down. And Qassam videos the camera from below shooting up the tunnel, watching the Israeli camera drop into the tunnel. And then the commander, who's at the third location watching on the CCTV, he sees when the last soldier goes into the building and he says, take them.
Yeah.
And they come out and they fight in the tunnel. And then they apparently blow up the rest of the tunnel. It's an incredible operation. And it shows, I mean, it showed just the operation was incredible, but the detail of what it suggests that they have these closed lines that we've seen all through this fight now, that they're on telephones, on safe, secure line telephones, communicating. We watched them use all various types of cameras, from really high quality ones to we watched them
Repurposed
use a
parking.
backup, yeah, a
Yeah.
parking camera to set up an ambush that killed 6 soldiers. And so you're seeing command and control in the most elaborate detail.
Yeah.
And then the whole story of October 7th is how they had that detail in
Mhm.
their operation. And on the other side, you had a collapsed Israeli army where nobody knew anything that was happening and is shooting crazily, trying to prevent hundreds of people from being taken captive into Gaza, which they could have let get taken captive into Gaza, and they could have immediately made a deal,
Yeah.
a prisoner exchange. Nobody said that Israel's only way of living in the Middle East is to
Right.
create a genocide, which at the beginning of this war, I would never have used that word.
Yeah.
And within a few weeks of the war, it's
There's
ludicrous to
no other
not
word.
use it.
Yeah.
So to think that this is Israel's only option in the world is
Yeah.
ridiculous. Hezbollah said it like you could make a multi-front um, like armistice agreement, gave back the Sheba farms,
Yeah. The
gave
Golan
back the
Heights.
border crossing and a port to the Palestinians,
Yeah.
exchanged huge numbers of prisoners. And if you want to keep, you could release all the prisoners up to the commander level,
Yeah.
in an exchange, and then keep the commanders and fight about whether they're going to let
Right.
Abdullah Barghouthi, out of prison, or if they're going to,
Yeah.
let these like bomb makers and organizers and, Marwan Barghouthi, who could be could be a prime minister or president of Palestine, Abdullah Barghouthi, who could put Qassam back in the West Bank with his skills. Just these kind of leadership. Ahmed Sadat of the PFLP could revive the left by releasing the assassins of Riham Zeevi, Those guys are, legends in Palestine to rejoin the Palestinian body politique. Like that, those kind of discussions could happen as a second
Right.
phase after you've released a huge number of your people
Exactly.
who are only in Gaza because your army was defeated by Qassam so thoroughly. Um,
So,
Honestly, I think
yeah.
that by watching the videos, Qassam could have taken more prisoners. I just think that Qassam was such better fighters, and they came in with such a good plan that they are actually killing these soldiers who are like would have quit because they weren't fighting.
Hmm.
Um, they they overtook them in a way and were like, okay, is that it? That
Yeah.
okay, we achieved our objective in
Yeah.
4 minutes. We now
Record time.
control this entire base. We have all these tanks in our
Yeah.
possession, all these
Yeah.
jeeps, all these guns, and all these soldiers who are worth thousands of prisoners. Each one of them,
Maybe they are, or
maybe they are,
maybe Israel just
doesn't
completely
care.
goes Hannibal and
Yeah,
just Hannibal's everything and everybody. But
yeah.
I've been saying you your society can't sustain just Hannibal being the overriding principle. We're a
No.
society that the first and last thing we do is kill the indigenous people, and we do it even at the expense of killing fellow settlers. That's I don't think that can work. I don't know. I mean, I guess we'll see.
It's a pathology. It's crazy. It makes
Yeah.
the concept is that they don't believe that their people are worth
Right.
releasing Palestinian political prisoners for.
Right.
That's the premise of the Hannibal Doctrine, is
Yeah.
that the release of prisoners is more harmful to the state of Israel than
Right.
just murdering you.
Yeah. That's the reason. So what is the reason for the state? What is the service that the state renders? What's the Hobbes, Locke, Leviathan social contract? What is it now? And
People are not going to move back to the South. I don't
yeah.
see that happening. If I was head of
Yeah.
the UN, I would make the Gaza envelope part of the Gaza Strip. I would give them a seaport to
Yeah.
export and give them an airport. I would
Yeah.
work on beginning to connect the West Bank and Gaza in some kind of legitimate way,
Yeah.
to prevent these other countries from thinking that destroying Israel is possible, which is what the
Right.
whole world is watching right now.
Right.
And why nobody's going to go live in the south of Israel is because, for all their racist talk, they actually do believe that Qassam is going to come into their living rooms.
Because by constantly saying, like, they're constantly saying it's existential, they want to kill everybody, they want to kill all the Jews, da 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 da. And by constantly saying that, it's covering the fact that everything they're doing is just to avoid making a deal. It's
Yeah.
all this is not an existential war. This is an alternative to making a deal that's been sitting on the table for years. For
Yeah.
years.
Yeah. And ending the
Decades.
siege of the Gaza Strip.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
Palestinians exchange some prisoners and end the siege, and
You'll have peace for ever,
yeah,
for indefinite.
for a while. The
Yeah.
Palestinians, that those basic concessions that are like the lowest,
Yeah.
like to allow humans to have their own
Yeah. To come and
food
go as they
sources
please.
and
Yeah.
trade.
Yeah.
Yeah, nobody's saying that they want Tel Aviv
Right.
right now. That's not the conversation that's happening. Although all the fighters have told their captives not to go back
But I
to
mean, yeah, but
to
like,
go
but
live in Tel Aviv.
but
Don't go
like the
back
right
to
of
the kibbutz.
return, we're getting far afield of a sit rep, but like the right of return also has never meant that Israelis have to leave. The right, like Israelis have been bringing in people to become citizens of Israel from all over the world forever since the founding of their state, and that didn't mean that they had to leave. So like Palestinians returning to their communities and to their homes also doesn't mean that that Israelis have to leave. That's not Palestinians, for the most part, when they talk about the right of return, it's about them wanting to go back. It's not about them wanting to
Yeah. It's
ethnically
not a zero
cleanse the
sum.
people. Yeah, exactly. Like Salman Abu Sitta, right? Speaking of maps, he has a series of maps called Implementing the Right of Return. I'd highly recommend. Maybe I can find it. Yeah, so all right, I think we covered a lot of October 7th. Was there anything what is there anything left? Do we have anything left to do? Do we have is there another show's worth of material on October 7th, or can we go back
No, I
to
think I mean
unless
I
some
would
new
like to
stuff?
see what happens with this story in English. Like Ronan Bergman is also the New York Times correspondent. So I'm curious to see how long before this story gets into
Mm.
the New York Times. Because it would be interesting to see the differences in the story. The Yetio story is not in English yet, is it?
No, I would just machine translate whatever Google translated
Yeah.
for me. So
So there's always that interesting aspect of the Hebrew media.
yeah,
The stories are always a little bit different and a
there's
little bit more honest. And when it comes into English, it's always a little bit, a little more tailored. But
yeah,
the New York Times has to look at a story like this. This is the thing, is that these investigations are just sitting there on a platter for these news organizations to do. And instead, they all at the same time tried to decide if there was a basement in Shifa Hospital. They didn't decide, let's figure out what happened on October 7th. And the one time they did was the New York Times abomination that I think will go down in journalistic history. A lot of these stories and these lies feel like the kind of scandal that's studied, like that this is the lie that led to the genocide.
yeah,
This is the reason the genocide happened. If the attack on that morning didn't have the lies surrounding it,
right, right,
most of the world would have seen the attack
yeah,
as legitimate.
yeah, yeah. And they've instead of correcting the record, they've just piled on more and more
Yeah, and more things that
lies.
are all tied to their legitimacy as a state. It's very,
So I just wanted to show Salman Abu Sitta's uh, article called "The Return Plan 2023,"
mhm,
and he's got maps.
mhm,
And basically, he shows that like where people would return to are not even the areas where most of the Israeli Jews live.
mhm.
Um,
And the
they're
envelope is even more so that way because that all that farmland in the
yeah.
south.
So he's talking about the village lands that have more than 30,000 Israeli Jews are shown dotted. That's where the Jews are the majority, and they are few and naturally adjacent to Jewish areas. If we repopulate Palestinian villages, we do not find any appreciable problem. In Galilee, Little Triangle, Beersheba, there's already a sizable Palestinian people ready to welcome their kith and kin.
Yeah.
So check this out, people. Um, it just gives you a sense of what right of return actually looks like. It's not the fever dreams of settler colonial racists. It's practical, feasible people returning to their own communities. Nobody, no, it's about not ethnic cleansing anymore. It's not about ethnic cleansing. All right.
Yeah.
So,
Like when the Americans did what they did in Abu Ghraib, they did it to people halfway across the world. The
yeah.
Israelis are doing it to people who live in their neighborhood, stripping
Mm-hmm,
them
mm-hmm,
naked and as a show of power,
yeah.
creating this dynamic. Um,
It's not a show of power. It's not a show of power. Nasrallah said that in one of his early speeches. He said, it doesn't take military power
no,
to kill civilians,
no,
to destroy hospitals.
no, or to tell elderly men who are sheltering with their families in a UN shelter to strip naked has no connection to
Yeah.
strength. But Israel believes that and has sort of seared into the consciousness of everybody that that's who they're fighting. I don't
So
know.
yeah, and I mean, I do think escalation is continuing, and I've been trying to. And tell me what you think of this before we go. We'll wrap after this, but I've been thinking that at the beginning, people would say things like the you'll see more and more escalation from Lebanon, from Iran, etc. Nobody even predicted the Houthis until it started happening, right? Nobody saw that coming. But people were saying those parties will only start really escalating when if it looks like the Palestinian resistance is losing. And that's why it's been so gradual. But I do feel that there is an escalating dynamic, and I think it's probably because of the humanitarian situation. And the humanitarian situation is not letting up at all. So even though the military situation is not looking bad, um, the the famine and disease situation is looking so bad that
It's just horrifying.
Yeah, so that's how we're going to end up in World War III, is because all the international community in the form of the West is just facilitating a famine in Gaza, in this
Catastrophic famine. 80% of the world's catastrophic famine. 4 out of 5.
And they're not going to let that, like, the allies of Palestinians are not going to let that happen without the war getting bigger. So here we are.
So there'll be more sit reps.
There'll be more sit reps. Stay tuned.